Hello student, yesterday we learned the lesson that you should never insult or humiliate anyone. That's what you actually experienced from the story of Nelson Mandela's childhood here. Now let's continue the story. After games such as these, I would return to my mother's hut where she was preparing supper. So after playing all these games, throughout the day, Nelson Mandela generally in the evening returns to his hut, to her mother who was actually preparing supper. At that point of time in the day, supper is what? Supper is evening meal. I have told you, I have taught you in many lessons, or generally a meal that we took before dinner. That is actually known as supper. So in simple word, you will understand here as an evening meal. So when Nelson Mandela used to return to his hut, in the evening, at that time, what his mother used to do? His mother was actually used to prepare supper. And you understand what the hut is. They lived in 3 huts. You saw in the beginning of the story. Whereas my father once told stories of historic battles and heroic Josa warriors, my mother would enchant us with Josa legends and fables that had come down from numberless generations. And actually at that time, while cooking the food, while preparing the supper, their mother and their father used to told him the stories of historic battles. Especially his father, Nelson Mandela's father, actually told him the stories of what? The stories of historic battles and heroic Josa warriors. Not only the historic battles that their race had in the past, but also about the heroic Josa warriors. Josa is actually the name of the race. In South Africa, or they are the Josa people. Josa is the different country also. The Josa, the people of there known as Josa, and they are considered as very warriors or very powerful men. So actually his father actually used to narrate him so many about so many heroic Josa warriors and then the historic battles. And actually his mother used to actually enchant those stories. She actually adds up with the Josa legends. His father actually used to narrate him the stories of historic battles and warriors, the great warriors of great Josa warriors. And then mother used to told him the legends. Legends are actually the stories, that transform from one generation to another generation orally. The oral stories, of real people, real incident, that is actually known as legends. Legends are actually the stories about real people or real incident which do not have any written record, but they are just transferred from one generation to another generation in oral form. And fables also. And fables, you all know, student, fables are actually the stories which always contains a moral in it. A childish story which contains a moral. So actually his mother used to actually narrate about all those legends and fables actually, and that had come down from numberless generations. And these legends and fables, it means these stories actually, as I told you, that these stories are generally passed to mouth orally from one generation to another generation, and these stories have passed on him. And this is actually there in their society, in their tribe, for many generations, from numberless generations. These stories have been passed from one generation to another. And these tales are actually stimulate my childhood. That's what Nelson Mandela is telling you. Tales are here again the stories. And stimulate means when something is stimulated by something, accelerated by something, when something is get the much needed fuel to do that task. So these stories actually work in Nelson Mandela's life as fuel to perform his own great deed and make his own path and way in the world of humans. And they usually contained some moral lesson, and all these stories, all these fables, lessons, as you know, generally contains moral lessons. So like all Josa children, I acquired knowledge mainly through observation. So actually you have seen in through his life story, the life of his childhood, that they did not used to go to school. There was no system of education, so whatever they learned, they only learned by the observation. It's only the sheer observation that actually made them learn so many things, and that actually taught them. It's about experience. It's not about reading in books or whatever you see in the world, that actually makes you, the world and time is a great teacher, and you need to learn from that. So like every other Josa children, Nelson Mandela also acquired knowledge through what? Through observation, by observing his surrounding, by observing his stories, lessons, travels, whatever he heard, by observing his surrounding, people around there, things around there. And acquired means, achieve, hasil karna. He actually acquired knowledge mainly through observation, like every other Josa children. There were no schools for them at that time. We were mental to learn through imitation and emulation, not through questions. They actually used to imitate or imagine. They actually did not learn anything through question. They just used to think in their mind, what is this and what should happen, probably happen, that this is the case. They used to say, it's about mind. The more you will think, the more sharp your mind will be, the sharper your mind will be. It's all about utilization. These days we do not use our brain also, use the brain to the fullest. Brain is actually the most powerful thing that exists in nature, or brain of any living animal actually.